Hi, thanks very much for joining us for Greensboro Glimpses. You're going to want to stay tuned to this program because we have a fascinating story to tell you that you're not going to want to miss. We're actually going to move just a little bit west of Greensboro, at least at the beginning of this program, but it's something that is beginning to take root in Greensboro as well, and we'll talk about that. My guest is Patty Jo Sawvel, who has written a book. It's called Under the Influence and subtitled The Town That Listened to Kids. And what they listened to the kids about was the use of drugs among young people. Patty Jo, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Jay.
You have a story to tell, and I want you to tell it, but let's talk a little bit about your background. You came to Kernersville from Michigan by way of Arizona, is that correct?
That's true.
And you went to work for a paper that you had laughed at, that you originally just sort of saw as a joke, I guess. Started working for them for $7 an hour. Tell us about that.
Well, I'd always wanted to be a writer, and when we moved to North Carolina, of course, it's a very welcoming state. And my husband saw an ad on television that said, come to this class, learn how to be a writer. So he paid the $20, sent me to the seminar. He's regretted it ever since. And what they recommended is that you contact your local newspaper, write a story, and get your first byline. And when I did that, they offered me a job to actually come to work for them. And so within quite a short period of time, they had decided to try to win the Community Service Award. And that's a very honorable thing. That's almost like Olympics for athletes. And what it is let's see how much good we can actually do for our community. And because all the good reporters, the experienced people were busy getting out the normal community paper, they hired me. And the topic that they gave me a choice of topics, and the topic that intrigued me was drugs and kids in the schools. And the reason why is because I came here with 3 teenagers, and I wanted to know, how do you keep kids from making the wrong choice? Because in my family, 9 kids, half the kids took the drug-free path, half the kids diverted onto drugs and alcohol addiction, 2 of them are still struggling, and I didn't want that for any of my kids. And I couldn't figure out, how do you get the same kids in the same family, same school, and they're making opposite choices? So this was a question I'd been passionate about finding the answer to way before I moved to Kernersville, and now I had an opportunity, a license to ask questions, dig, find answers, and it's amazing. As an investigative reporter, people open up and talk to you. So kids, I discovered, are so honest. They'll tell you exactly what's going on in your schools, and that's where I started. Let the kids drive the stories, because here I was, a Yankee. I didn't know the culture. You know, I was a brand new transplant down here. And so I had to think, how could I move this community? They're not going to listen to me. And Kernersville is a very nice, good self-esteem community. They're not going to listen to national reports. They're not national average type people. And so instead, by interviewing their local kids, putting their raw voices, this is what's going on in school, this is how much I'm seeing drugs, this is the pro-drug talk. And then when the community heard that, they were shocked. It's like, wow,
yeah,
we never thought.
That attitude that you mentioned about Kernersville, they thought, we couldn't possibly have a drug problem. We're just not that type of community.
That's right. Before they really looked at the facts, they thought, because we're such a pleasant, wholesome community, and they have festivals, and it's just a very warm, hey neighbor kind of a community. And so when I polled adults thought, maybe 10% of our kids have a problem with drugs. When I polled the kids, 1,700 students, basically everybody who showed up for high school that day, 92% of the kids said, we believe most kids, and actually 70% of our peers, are using drugs. So you got adults thinking 10%, students thinking 70%. They were both wrong. Kernersville is right at the national average, 36%. And until you get your adult and student community seeing eye to eye, they can't help each other.
Right, exactly.
So that was the very important place to start, asking, because when you're trying to solve a problem, reality and perception are equally important. You can't just look at reality. So actually, when we told the kids only 36%, they didn't believe us. Because the pro-drug talk was so great at school, and the kids who weren't using, which are the majority, were staying silent, because it was almost like if I said, hey, I don't use drugs, I don't need them, or you do what you want, but I don't believe in taking drugs for myself, it's not going to get me where I want to go. The kids told us that was like putting a target on their chest. It's like, bully me, tease me.
Right.
And so instead, the kids would just either ignore it, or some kids would fabricate a little bit. Yeah, I got drunk this weekend too, or yeah, I got high. And they weren't. They were just trying to not be attacked by their peers.
That 92% was perception. So really your job was to try to get it reality, right?
You got it.
Yeah,
you got it.
yeah.
Because reality tends to follow perception. So if kids really believe that most kids are doing something, even if they're not inclined to do it, they want to fit in.
Yeah.
When kids see the truth that most kids aren't using drugs, then it's easier for them to stand up and say, hey, most kids don't use drugs. I'm not inclined. I don't want to. I don't believe in it. And I'm not going to. But the power comes in allowing kids to join together, giving them something positive to rally around. So what Kernersville did is, over the course of much investigation and searching, we discovered that in Carver High School, one of our high schools, they had a very successful program. It was called the It's My Call Voluntary Drug Testing Program. Now, Carver's big selling point to its students is, we are the traditional black high school. We get treated like the stepchild. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks we have more violence and more problems here. We need to earn some respect. And the way we will earn respect is by voluntarily joining a drug testing program and showing we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're good, we're a clean school, and we're not a drug-ridden school. Now, the way this program was set up, and then the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools adopted this for the entire school district when Kernersville was looking for something. And the way it's set up is that if a child fails the drug test, the police are never called. Nothing goes on their permanent school record, so it doesn't affect their chances of getting a college scholarship. They get free help, and no one finds out, excuse me, except the principal and one parent. And their classmates never find out, because as long as they're getting their free help, they continue in all their sports, all their extracurricular. So it's a beautiful program, and the kids see it as fair and respectful. It allows them to keep their dignity. And because of that, Carver was getting 80 to 90% of their students voluntarily joining the program. Now, when we adopted that program in Kernersville, when basically it was adopted through the whole school system, initially, no kids signed up. And so, you know, they just didn't see the benefit of joining a voluntary drug testing program. So the superintendent put out a call to Kernersville and said, why doesn't your community create some incentives? So the kids who sign up get an incentive. And the Kernersville Police Department took on the challenge and created T-shirts. And they let each of the schools design their own T-shirts, so the kids had ownership and buy-in. And then also the police department came up with this great idea. The school with the highest percentage of kids voluntarily jumping into this random drug testing pool would get a victory party, a party with the police. So imagine you're a teenager and the police come and they hire a DJ, so you've got music and you've got police serving you as the teenager hot dogs and soda pop and potato chips. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal to kids.
Let me interrupt you just long enough to say you're talking like all this just sort of happened. And as I read your book, it didn't just sort of happen. It happened because of your persistence and the countless visits that you made, the countless calls that you made, the tremendous amount of background work that you did to make these things happen.
Well, that's the beauty of being the investigative reporter, is that I was able to talk to the parents, talk to the judges, talk to the police, talk to the schools. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you do become like the eye of the needle. Everything passes through you. You know what all the community needs are and who has the resources. And so I was able to pull together people. And that was a very satisfying part of this whole project, was being able to, for instance, when the superintendent said, why doesn't the community create incentives? And I happen to know through a previous interview with the police department, they just started a new theme: zero tolerance for drugs. Mm-hmm. So not only did we trumpet his message to the whole community, but I hand-delivered a copy of his challenge to the chief of police and asked him if this might not be a good match for his theme for the police department. The problem they were having in Kernersville, and it may be similar for Greensboro, nobody wants a child to have a police record. Right. So when the police were getting calls, hey, there's kids smoking pot on the street corner, the police would go out, they'd confiscate their drugs, and they'd say, you know, go home and don't do this again. Well, they thought they were giving the kids a second chance. The way the kids were interpreting this is the police don't have any power.
Yep.
They can't do anything to me.
Sure.
We can stand here and smoke drugs.
Yeah.
And then they started getting a little empowered by this and started, getting into break-ins and stealing cars, and it was not a good method. So the police chief decided, mercy doesn't work. These kids need accountability and they need consequences. This is the world we live in. And so he set up a system to where every child or every adult who was caught with illegal drugs paid a consequence, even if that consequence was community service. Now, on the other hand, he's looking for a way to partner with the kids, gain their respect. So when he comes in on the other side of this and creates T-shirts for the kids and throws a party for the kids, that showed the kids, he's not just interested in catching us doing things wrong. Our police department is actually interested in building respect, teamwork. They're here to protect us. They're listening to us. And so it did wonderful things for our youth and for our police department and actually for the whole community. But getting back to, no, one person did not make this happen. Had this not, it's like an orchestra. I did picture myself sometimes like the conductor of an orchestra. But the idea is you've got everybody in their seats. They're all playing off the same sheet of music. And the only thing I was doing was coordinating this so this wonderful thing could happen.
Well, yeah, it's almost like, though, an assignment became a passion.
Oh, that absolutely did happen, yes, because as you read in the book, I did not get paid for hardly any of my work. But, the best things in life, our best pay in life never is the paycheck. Our best pay in life is the emotional satisfaction that we get from actually helping other people and solving real problems. And those lessons, there's lessons learned in this book that could never have been learned even in a college setting or a master's program. When you're getting right out there, rolling up your sleeves and working with hundreds of kids and hundreds of people in the adult community, and you overcome roadblocks and you learn leadership skills on the way, kind of on the fly, it's just a remarkable life.
And there were
experience.
considerable roadblocks, actually, as it turned out. This wasn't quite as easy as it may sound.
That's true. That's true. But that's real life, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I would bet if you delineated the best things of your life, a lot of times the worst things in your life preceded the best things in your life. So we all have roadblocks, and that's the challenge, climbing Mount Everest. Or it's not always Mount Everest, but, climbing those mountains, that is the joy in life.
Yeah, no question. But now this program, It's My Choice, also later they had developed a companion program called It's Our Choice. And I believe, if I understand it correctly, kids that did not voluntarily then take the drug test were reported. Is that correct? Well,
okay, so we'll get it straight. And basically, when the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools initially rolled out the program, they rolled out a 2-leg program. The first leg was mandatory. And what that said is, if you're a role model, which means you're an athlete or you do any extracurricular and you're representing the school and sometimes safety's involved, you have to, it's our call as the school, you have to join the random drug testing program. It's mandatory. So when you sign your permissions and your physical, you also sign, and your parent co-signs, that you're going to be in a random drug testing program. The second leg of the program is, half the kids aren't in any extracurricular. They're not what you'd call role model, and so they don't have to be in this. But the other half of the students had a choice of joining It's My Call. That means I make the choice. I sign a pledge, I stand up, and I voluntarily jump into this random drug testing pool. And so the mandatory caught about 40% of the kids and got them into a program that if they needed help, they could get free help, continue in their sports. And the whole idea is, it's not a let's catch the bad kids, it's a let's get all kids back on the drug-free path.
How accurate did that 92% turn out to be? Was that pretty much spot on, or was it high, low?
Well, 1 out of 3 kids in Kernersville were using drugs, which is absolutely the national average, and it's still about the national average.
So that 92% perception was actually 33% reality. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and I'll tell you what turned it around. When Glenn High School, once when the program was first rolled out, Glenn High School had 40% of its kids in the drug testing program. The only ones that were in there were the ones that had to be in there. They had virtually no students in the voluntary part of the program. When the police department created the T-shirts and let's have a victory party, then our 2 high schools, Glenn and East, went into a competition. And within 8 weeks, Glenn High School went from 40% to 87%, top of the district. When they had their victory party and they're all dancing around and eating their hot dogs and signing, autographing their T-shirts like their yearbooks, on each other's backs, and they're just having a great time. Yeah. I was, of course, at that party, and I was in my investigative reporter mode, and I did an unofficial, unapproved, but nonetheless, I wanted to know, did we change perception? So I snuck around and interviewed several of the students randomly, and I said to them, okay, 87% of your classmates say they're drug-free. They signed the pledge. What percent do you really think are drug-free? And they said 60% on average. So in 1 year, the students saw for themselves, wow, most kids in my school don't use drugs. And they corrected their own perception within, about 4 percentage points, which is phenomenal to correct perception in 1 year. And it was actually less than a year. It was just from March or January to March, something like that. So when a community gets behind its kids and helps the kids have something positive to rally around, and then you get kids to actually stand up and come together and start speaking out for what the majority believed in, which is, I want to be drug-free. You can transform a school, and that's exactly the words that Principal Adolphus Copeland said. He said, KCK and it's my call. So Kernersville Cares for Kids was the nonprofit that the police department founded to support the incentives.
Well, we need to talk about that just a little bit, because all of these activities that you've been talking about for a long time were done by the police department and by individuals in the community, but it eventually led to that organization called KCK, Kernersville Cares for Kids.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that, how that organization evolved and how it got started, what it does.
Okay. Well, briefly, what happened is the police said, we will pilot this, we will do this, and it was a huge success. And the day of the victory party, I said to the chief, can we count on you again for next year? And he said yes. And within 30 days, his father died and completely changed the paradigm of his life. And he called me in and he said, Patty Jo, and he's a man of his word. He said, Patty Jo, we can't do this again. We can't do it alone. And I said, you know what, Chief? That's good, because this isn't the police department cares for kids. This is Kernersville Cares for Kids. And we need to go back to the community and get board members and build this thing into something that the community sustains. And that's what happened. So the police piloted it the first year, and they remained one of the 3 co-sponsors. So our 3 co-sponsors are the Kernersville Police Department, the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, and the Kernersville News. And at our monthly meetings, who shows up is the owner of the newspaper, the chief of police, and the superintendent of the schools. That right there tells our whole community this is important. They're not sending the new Green Reporter. Right. They're not sending a brand new...
Although you were far from green by then.
Yes. But the point is, when top leadership stands behind something, and they've stood behind it now for 14 years, that says something to the community, that they think this is important. We need to think this is important. And so Kernersville's been excellent at stepping up every year with fundraising and all the many activities, the festivals that the kids present at, and speaking at civic clubs. So the community's been very supportive.
Yeah, and one of the goals of KCK, Kernersville Cares for Kids, the goal is not just to catch kids that are on drugs, but to keep them off of drugs going forward.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And what are some of the programs that they've developed to do that?
Well, my favorite program is a couple of years ago, we developed a leadership program. And it started with someone in the schools, Mina Cook, and she was with the Safe and Drug-Free Schools, Unlimited Success. And she said, we're not really utilizing our student leaders. They're not helping us as well as they could because they're not comfortable. And we need to give them some training. So she started Saturday leadership classes. And she'd get all of our 10 or 20 leaders. We had different numbers at different times. Well, let's just say 20 leaders, all in the same room a few days before the board meeting. And then she'd talk to them about, what do you want? What's working in your school? And the kids consolidated into a team. And the first time she did that, the very next board meeting, the kids marched up front and they had posters, and it's like, we want to be at the Spring Folly, we want to speak at clubs, we want to design our t-shirts, there are various things that they wanted. And it changed the whole energy of our board meeting, because you know how board meetings can be.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody really wants to be there, and you want to get it over with as
They're
quick
often
as
misspelled.
possible.
B-O-R-E-D is the way they should be
That's
spelled
exactly
sometimes.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of like going through the motions, and anytime you have any organization that's not going and growing, it's dying. And we were stagnant. And when those kids came in there and they got up there and said, this is what we want, and one of the students said the reason why she thought it worked is because when they put their ideas on posters, the adults could see their ideas better. And when we heard their ideas, there was a whole energy of, that's right, we're doing this for the kids, and we're here to support their ideas. They're not here to take dictation from us. This is Kernersville Cares for Kids, and it needs to be student-driven and student-led. And so it just changed the whole dynamics. Well, I got an opportunity the next year. So the kids became very outspoken, very energetic, took full ownership of the program. And then Mina's grant expired, and she left, and for a year, there was no leadership training. And this is unbelievable, Jay, I'm sorry. But what happened is the kids, same kids, they'd had a year of leadership training. Now they're getting no meetings of their own before the adult board meeting. And they revert back to their sit in the seat, read off a piece of paper, like they'd been before they had any training. And what that told me is, kids need ongoing leadership. And it's not just ongoing leadership. They need to meet as a team, be a team, and then present their ideas as a team. Otherwise, it's pretty intimidating for one student to stand up.
And they also need leadership at home. What can parents do
to
involve themselves in this?
Yes. Well, there are a few things that parents can do. Number one, the book actually gives 12 rules that are scientifically proven that if you adopt these rules in your household, then this greatly reduces the chances of your child making self-destructive decisions such as drugs, alcohol, other vandalism, other choices like that. And some of these rules are pretty reasonable. One is eat dinner with your family at least, or eat dinner with your family like 6 of the 7 nights a week. And if dinner doesn't work, then breakfast. And CASA, which is involved in drug prevention, actually set this past Monday as National Eat Dinner with Your Family Night. And it's sad, I bet when you grew up, you ate dinner with you as a family every night.
Well, my dad was in the funeral business, and he wasn't often at home, so I didn't have that luxury, but
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was normal back then, and I know I did growing up. We ate dinner as a family every night. But nowadays, the plea is, can you pick one night out of the year that you can all get together and eat dinner? Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why eating dinner as a family reduces poor choices with young people isn't because we're all eating. It's because at mealtime, we're bonding. Yeah. Having conversation, problem solving, sharing our events of the day. Another one is assign your routine regular chores. Why would that? Because it's going to get all the work done? No, what really happens is accountability. Kids learn how to do a chore, what real work is. And then another one is supervise internet use. So it's a protection factor. But what we're finding is 70% of young people nowadays are being raised by hands-off parents, having 5 or less rules in the household, and having a self-guided childhood, which is disastrous. So these children are 3 to 5 times more likely to get involved in drugs and alcohol because they're not seeing the boundaries, the accountability, the caring, the nurturing, and the protection that every young person deserves. Yeah. I don't know how much time we have.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I wanted to bring this a little closer to home because you were telling me that you've been talking with Ken Miller, the Chief of Police of Greensboro, and the Greensboro Police Department is interested in getting involved in something like this as well.
Absolutely. So the Chief of Police heard about this at the Rotary, same where you did, and he actually, over the course of about 30 days, bought 50 copies of this book. And the reason why is he liked the story, he liked what it was, the success. And it's not brand new. It's tried and tested, 14 years. So what he did is gave this book to his command staff and several people in the community, and he's actually looking to implement a voluntary drug testing system. He hasn't been able to get the schools locally engaged or involved yet, and that might be something where if people say, hey, this sounds great for our kids, call your school board members, call your superintendents, and see if you can get them to take a look at this program, because it really does dramatically reduce drug use. It changes perception. It gives kids a way to say no, and if they make a mistake, it gives them a chance to get back on the drug-free path painlessly. And that's what we all want. We're not interested in punishing kids. We're interested in helping them.
Yeah. Well, I hope the parents and others that are watching will take heed to that and make those phone calls. Get in touch with the school board. Get in touch with the police department. Tell them you're behind this and want to see something like this happen in Greensboro, because it obviously can have a tremendous effect.
Yes.
Yeah, tremendous impact. What's the future of KCK? Where do you see it going?
Well, the community loves KCK, and the chamber president actually said if Kernersville Cares for Kids did not already exist, we'd have to create it. So it's a way of building a stronger village for your kids. You know, most kids are growing up now in broken homes. So the family's been ruptured, and there's more incidents of drug and alcohol addiction. There's these. It's amazing the statistics of what happens when homes are broken. And so if we're going to live in a society where most kids are growing up in broken homes, we have to build a stronger community. That's the only way. The village has to step up and offer more support. And that's what KCK is. And some of the kids have said, and it's actually been studied, schools that have the voluntary drug testing but don't have the community support, while they may have the same number of kids pledging and in the program, it does not affect actual drug use. So without the community support, and a lot of our kids have told us, if the community wasn't backing us and putting us in the newspaper and giving us incentives, this program wouldn't be working in the schools.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're out of time. It's a fascinating story, yeah.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for the work that you've done. And you were a little too modest. I think without your efforts, this probably wouldn't have happened like it did. But it's a tremendous story. It's really made an impact in Kernersville. The book is Under the Influence. The author is Patty Jo Sawvel, and I want to thank you for being my guest on the program.
Thank you, Jay.
You bet.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for watching.
You're watching Cable 8, Greensboro Community.